of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Like if everybody would take this time to turn off or silence your cell phones, except for Tanya, you're exempt. And if we have any visitors, to make sure that you signed in over there.
I'm the only one in town. Steve and I are the only two fire chiefs in town, so we kind of gotta leave one pager on here.
Yeah, absolutely. You
We
guys,
understand.
yeah, you guys are exempt too. We'll go ahead, is Hal online now?
Alice online.
All right, and I just want to remind everybody that we are recording and streaming for posterity and for all the residents. Dan, you want to go ahead and start us off? We'll do the public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant Newton Park.
Pursuant to CFR 24-570-489, the village will direct program income derived from past community development block grant programs in the amount of $24,548.14 to the purchase of Americans with Disability Act compliant playground equipment. Said material and construction will be for the benefit of Newton Park, a local neighborhood pocket park. So this is not a new grant, this is program income that we've already had in the coffers, and we need to direct it to a eligible program. This program is eligible, and that's what we're gonna use it for. So,
Do we have anybody from the public that would like to speak on this?
I voted on it, on the thing.
Did you vote?
I think so. I actually chose the one that had 150 people. I
Yep,
think,
yep.
The first one.
150 out of
I liked it
200.
because it was more open. And
Yeah, there were 297 votes total.
It's very good.
Castle came in second place at about 100, I believe, and the first one had 150 votes. So
Yeah, we have the total tallies, I think, in our
Yep.
packet, along with the picture of the winning. So I'd like to personally thank everybody for voting. And is there anything else we need to do at this point, Dan,
Go
or
for it.
no further comments from the public?
no further comments from the public. It's not, the vote is just to get the program income allocated for that purpose.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion to allocate the funds from the CBDG grant money that we have in escrow.
All in discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Passed. So at this point, we will close the public hearing and open the Board of Trustees meeting. All right. First up is the minutes.
As we all have.
Motion carried. All right. I do not see Mr. Teeter here, but for everybody else, we have received the draft document on the downtown parking study. So we will go ahead and move to the treasurer's report while Mr. Teeter go ahead and get set up.
I'm all set.
Okay, well then, never mind, we'll go right into it.
All right, Benny.
You know how to make an entrance.
That's right, exactly. Let me get my things out here.
All right.
Proceed. So I debated on how to best do this. Hello, Zach.
how you doing? You're live, right on the camera, just so you know.
What?
You're live on camera. Just so
That's
you
all
know.
right. So, in the course of debating on, okay, how do I give you this information? And I ultimately landed with this, which is, and again, we don't want to, I'm going to get to that front page, the recommendations at the end of what I speak.
Sure.
Let me think here. One there. No, I got two more. So you guys can do whatever you want. But I wanted to cover, there's a lot here. So it's, okay, what's the best way to try to capture what I would see as the most essential pieces for the purposes of at least tonight's meeting? I guess as a start, did, and who may have had the opportunity to read the draft that was brought here 2 weeks ago? Okay, so maybe some of you have looked at it to a degree, read it all, some, whatever. So, again, I don't want to belabor everything that was covered, because some of it's not as important as others. I saw it as two things. One, to provide you with sort of a tool to go forward, and two, the opportunity as a resource of, okay, what does your code say in parking? Well, now you know. You can go, you don't have to go to the code, you can go to your parking study. So that was kind of where I came from. But as far as tonight, you know, some of the key things that were in my scope of work, and the essence of this was to understand the existing conditions, inventory those conditions, know exactly what's going on in downtown, okay? This is probably not a good place to stand.
Maybe over that way.
It just hit me.
Right there's perfect.
Okay. Second was regulations. What are some of the implications of what you have on the books, what's out there for signage, you know, even from the private sector standpoint of how do they regulate their parking lots? Because there's a lot of sort of mixed use, you might say, of who's using what. It's not necessarily, okay, this lot is for the bank, and the only bank people go here. Not so, as most everybody fully understands. I also wanted to get a pulse from the business owners and those that aren't necessarily the owners of the property, but also run a business, as to what's their concerns, what's their issues, what do you see as the biggest things happening, and just see what I got from them for peak operational information. You know, when are you busy? Obviously, there's the seasonal part, which for retail is always gonna be, you know, that second half, the latter part of the year, November through Christmas, that's just an increased shopping time, as everybody knows. So retail sees, whoop, a lot more activity. Some businesses, it's pretty steady Eddie, year-round, they do a good business no matter when. And then from there, just to kind of give you some recommendations of how to go forward. So I did a lot of photography. What you didn't get, for those that saw the draft, there's going to be an additional appendix which is going to have selective photographs from parking lots as well as the streets, just to give you again as a reference book. Okay, this is what, oh, that's what it looks like back there. Just for you in the future. It's also, you know, going to include, and what I did in conjunction with that was inventory and literally count everything, every space, in every lot, and put them into categories, as you may have seen. I did the questionnaire, that gave me a bunch of data. I spoke with key stakeholders that I could reach and connect with in terms of some of your key downtown businesses, get their input, see where they're at. I also met with both of your developers, owners that are proposing the new projects. David Yeaman for the new construction in the building there, and Renee Niederman for the apartments and the improvements in her building there at Bevis. Reviewed all your local regulations, met with Kevin, met with your DPW, Mike Harder, met with your police chief, never got a chance to connect with your fire chief, so I didn't get an input there. But a variety of things that I saw as being what was going on. And then every time I came back from Cortland, I drive around and I sit in the parking lot and I watch and see who's there and try to figure out who's parking where and watch what's going on with green. So I tried to get a sense, just, I live here, so I already had a sense, but this was like a little more heightened awareness. So your study area, at the back of your little booklet, or 4-page thing, the last, or second to last page, I guess it's page 3, that's the study area, the map with the highlighted area, and briefly, as we had discussed before, it's essentially from the Center for the Arts and American Legion, in terms of a southern boundary, up through the core downtown area to the intersection of where the town hall, where we are tonight, as well as Clinton Street. Both sides of the road, of the street. Some go deeper than others, and as you can see, it's not easy to depict on there. I did include the property you own at the intersection of Pine and River Street, because you had asked for, evaluate that residential lot. So that's your study area. Land use, your primary land use, and in terms of what goes on here, is actually, for such a small space, incredibly varied. You've got a school, a library, assisted living facility, 2 banks, retail, your typical service, food service, a post office, and this whole range is concentrated primarily in that, 2-block area, from, just opposite the Village Green through Wall Street. Churches, you've got several churches in that same area. Zoning, Central Business District is the primary. Again, it's in the main report, the map from the zoning, as well as R2, Residential 2. Central Business District is primarily located on the east side and begins just south of the library and goes and extends all the way to Water Street, right outside your window here, all the way to the river. Okay, on the west side, it's much more limited, and it's pretty much that key area from the bank, the Dryden Bank, through the acupuncture and Dashers on the north side, just north of James Street. Regulations, you've got a variety of regulations. They depict and they utilize schedules in your zoning that give you the key information as to what happens where, what limitations you might have, what restrictions. There are certain prescribed regulations of time limits. It's not a lot, but there are portions of it, and the report as well has that all detailed out, so you don't have to go back to that ordinance. I've included it all in the report, okay? Pedestrian use, identified all your sidewalks, and you're pretty well, obviously, well sidewalked throughout this whole vicinity, except for some very limited areas. And crosswalks. The pedestrian thing was not a primary focus, except it really kind of rose, or it became somewhat significant in 2 regards. One, how to get pedestrians from a parking area to your core businesses in the downtown. And 2, the safety issue of the pedestrians at the James Street lot. Okay, because that parking lot is right there adjacent to the sidewalk. The questionnaire, I sent out about 50 questionnaires. I got 36 back. I clearly had tremendous interest. The downtown people, any business owner that I came across, some people, snaggled me, you're the guy doing the parking study. And others, I went and introduced myself and had good conversation. And it was obvious that there was a genuine interest in trying to get information together to serve you, to serve them. Everybody is going to benefit if we can work together. So, and that was recognized, which was obviously makes my life and my job easier. From the questionnaire, I just want to give you a couple of key highlights. They gave me operational information of, certainly the seasonal busy times, the second half of the week, obviously your food services and the village market with their lunch, sandwich takeout. They were busier then. Your post office, later in the day or around the midday. There was a recognition that that group of businesses from Pine to Wall does not truly provide, adequate parking by regulation. I mean, it's clear those parcels, by their definition, are very limited in their additional space beyond the actual footprint of the building. That was understood. And so that's why I think we also have a genuine interest, because everybody wants people to park and get into their stores. That's the nature of the business. There was definitely concern that with the 2 new projects, the situation as we have it now, that there was going to be a negative impact on business. As to whether that's totally well-founded, that's a little, that's that crystal ball. We'll see. But I think with some of the information here, maybe we can limit that and hopefully continue to be more progressive in trying to make things happen in advance of the problem being created. I'll continue and get to conclusions later. I was going to say. A couple of specific things, actually, right here Water Street and what happens on that south side. Lack of definition, where's the edge of the street? This is a little odd here, Water. Admittedly, it's not in your core area, but, you know, the parking along the town hall, the street, you know, again, kind of a little weird. You pull in right from the street and you're in a parking space. And on the south side, where you do have retail businesses lined up there, the physical therapy and the others, of what is the intent, and should there in fact be created some public parking on that south side, defining the edge with a curb or something? Again, that's the kind of thing I got, and there was one comment about, make sure you leave the parking free, okay? So, nobody, they didn't want to see any charges associated with the park. Okay, continuing. Inventory, grand totals, public parking, I defined in two different ways, on street and your designated parking lots, which at this point are two, okay, James Street and the ones behind the core downtown businesses. On the street, from the study area limits, north to south, all streets, you have 117 standard parking spaces and one accessible handicap parking designated space. In your parking lots, you have a total of 32 now available spaces with 0 handicap parking spaces designated, okay? So that brings you to a total of 149 standard and 1 handicap under what would be classified as I've defined public parking spaces. Everybody else I put into the category of what I call private/quasi-public, because you have facilities like the library and others that are not necessarily totally private enterprises. The school, you know, is another illustration. I total all of them. Their totals, 454 spaces. It's more than I expected. I saw your eyebrows.
Absolutely.
454, but this is everything else, okay? Fire department, it's the back of the Brewster House, okay? Any of these businesses, and what they have, obviously the Dryden Bank, that alone was 56, the post office. All of a sudden, you get into the hundreds, and there were, for handicap designation, 33. And this includes the school, too, don't forget. Center for the Arts, all of them. Grand totals, a little over 600 standard parking spaces, with 34 additional designated as handicap accessible, okay? Signage and striping, I'm not going to speak about, it's in the report. I noted everywhere there was signage associated with your lots, what happens in the private lots. There's generally not an excessive amount of signage in the private lots, which is saying, you know, you're going to be towed and this is, you know, authorized for only. Yes, there are some, but it's not extensive, which makes it a more friendly environment. But in reality, the private sector, yes, their only real means of enforcement is to make sure they have adequate signage so that if you do park there, you know you're at risk. In the public lots, again, the signage, your signage to the lots isn't bad, you know. There's nothing in one of my recommendations to indicate the James Street lot. There is no signage on Main Street saying there's a parking lot that way. You've got two, one at Pine and one at Wall, to get you into the back, behind the core stores. And then the signage in them is not totally consistent. Again, I've made recommendations on improving that so that it's clear as to what's happening in each of your lots when you're not allowed, you know, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. and all of that kind of thing. But that's, I'm not going to speak about that anymore. So utilization, primary influences of how the spaces are used is certainly your various retail shops and when they're busy. Post office has its times where, and you know this too, where you pull up and you go, there's no more spots in front of the post office, so you turn the corner, you go into the lot behind, or you stop in front of Dashers, grab that spot before the the hydrant to go to the post office. But that happens, and at other times, there's nobody there, okay? It varies. But that's an influence, and clearly, the school. There is no doubt the big picture influence that impacts, and yes, it's occasional, but it clearly has the greatest impact, and thankfully not in the core area too much, is what happens at the school because of their inadequate number of spaces that they have. They literally have probably in the range of 20 to 25 vehicles associated with people working there that are on the street occupying spaces during the day of the school day, okay? You've seen it primarily across the front of the Green, north side of Cayuga Street, opposite the Center for the Arts, and then along what's basically, it's Central Park Place, the little doodah, street that goes to the school. It's a public street, even though it's on the congregational land, it's in kind of a unique situation there. But there's 7 spaces along the Congregational Church that are occupied essentially all day, and they too are working at the school. So you've got to, and what happens is, in part, there's a lot of people that drop off and pick up their kids in the morning, okay? And that was well documented in the questionnaire, the concern of what happens in the lots when the parents come. They have to park somewhere because these are elementary students. They're young. And that implication has this ripple effect of occupying spaces, short term, yes, but sometimes 15 minutes, could be more, of when at that peak time, there's a whole bunch of spaces that get used, and if you're going to the rheumatology doctor or you've got to stop in at the post office, it may be a little more challenging. Or the Lucky Kitchen restaurant, which is closer to the school in terms of the end of the core area, that those spaces are going to be used because parents stopped there, parked, walked across, got their kid and came back. Is it huge? No, and it's concentrated at these 2 primary times, but you've already got all the Green occupied. That's the odd sort of consequence of the inadequacy of the school, is that it occupies what would be drop-off pickup locations. So it pushes it elsewhere, is what happens, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Special events, you have a lot of key things that you do and host. Winterfest, you know them. Fireman Field Days. The Center for the Arts is alive and well, as you very well know. And that is a great thing, because there's no question, as a volunteer there, as the greeter guy, I love having Dashers here. It's a great place to go eat before the show. And the economics of it are definitely a positive, there's no question. But it occupies a whole bunch of parking spaces those nights that it's sold out. But luckily, it's after hours more so than key during the day. Those big concerts, they're starting at 8, so people are rolling in 6:30, depending on if they're eating, and it's more southern. It's obviously Cayuga Street and South Main, even outside of our study area. So we're fortunate sort of in that location of that particular facility. One of the other things that I added here, and again, I'm not going to focus on tonight, but I gave you, because I had found it in researching various things, and I gave you just highlights about myths, parking myths. And I was fascinated by it, the way it kind of captured some key concepts that aren't necessarily all applicable to where you're at now. But I saw it as an opportunity in your resource of looking through this report that it might help you guide some of the thinking of, how do we move forward? What do we need to do? How should we be thinking about this? And just a couple of illustrative myths. People do not like to walk, okay? Myth, okay? When you've got a downtown that's got stuff to go walk by, okay? And you think about it, you go to Skaneateles, which is a bigger downtown, and other communities, it's nice to window shop, okay? People like doing that and seeing, oh, that's a new place, whatever. So the walking thing is an extraordinary distance, that's a different story. But the overall phenomenon is not necessarily a negative. All parking must be in front. Thankfully, you've got this great visual of a downtown with its older buildings that it's the storefronts and the parking is in the rear. You don't want to look at parking lots. Even the one behind the post office and the bank generally is not a visual impact if you're on Main Street, which in my mind is an important piece from the aesthetics of the attraction of the community. So again, you may want to look at these as you get further into how we're gonna, what's gonna happen, or a new project is proposed, whatever it might be. Findings, key findings, interesting thing, when it's all said and done, you're not in bad shape right now. Generally, it's not filled every spot. You know, I know, living here, that when you come through, and I travel, because I work out of my home as an office, so, and I'm up at SUNY Cortland different times of day, so I'm coming back in the evening, in the late morning, all sorts of different times, and generally there's a spot. And, you know, right there in the core area that you can find. Not always, and it varies, but it's not bad. But the problem is, or the uncertainty is, you're adding a bunch of cars now with the two projects, and the parking requirements associated with them. So there's an uncertainty there of what's gonna happen. The key places that don't provide adequate facilities, the school, as I've identified, those downtown businesses, they generally are not meeting what they theoretically should be providing for their footprint, building square footage, according to your code. I think I did a calculation, and I'm not sure if it's in the report, for the square footages of all the retails between Pine and Wall, there should be 100 and, you know, X, I don't remember, 120 spaces, and they actually provide, you know, 30, or are capable of providing, you know, a far reduced number. That's the way it is. This is not unique to Homer. Older communities, this situation exists everywhere. This isn't specific to here. If you were to do something with, and there's a couple of different more detailed recommendations, with the block behind the core businesses, you probably could get it up to 30 spaces. On the last page of your 4-page little handout, you'll see a little proposed, maybe this is a possibility. And it includes striping associated with where it is now, the lot, and obviously with the construction off of Pine Street, that hasn't been striped, it's kind of a mess, and ultimately will get cleaned up. But you see some opportunity. The mayor had a comment, I did hear back from him about, he felt these 4 spaces along what is the fence line would probably not work because trailers come in there to deliver. I must admit, I did not get back to, I'm assuming it must be for Kevin Williams and the store. Maybe it's Homerman and Boys. I can't say that I know that for certain. But Pine Street is, you know, a challenge. I'd be shocked if they're coming in off of Pine, to tell you the truth, because that street is so narrow already that if they're gonna have to get behind, I gotta believe they would go to Wall and then make the swing. I don't know that. I don't know that for certain. But that's just a plan, and obviously you can see that there are 2 behind Lucky Kitchen, which actually straddle what is the private property and your property. Obviously would have to work something out, but I'm just looking at trying to optimize. And it obviously includes no dumpsters, because that's what's happening out there. I talked to Kevin, I talked to Rob, and we, you know, I think there's again, a sense that it's to everybody's benefit if they can consolidate a location for the dumpsters, and perhaps all agree on one hauler, because you've got 3 different identifiable dumpsters back there, based on different businesses, Casella, Waste Management, and I don't remember the other one. So that became the light. The lot across the river, Pine and River Street, the lower level is amenable for construction. 23 spaces is likely. We did a quick and dirty conceptual plan, it's in the report. It is not in this, I didn't see it as being critical. And for that lot, yes, you own it. The only way I would recommend consideration of constructing that, there's going to be a cost, would be if you have a commitment. And the difficulty, once someone, you know, they see a sign, parking continuing across the bridge, that's probably the last time they're going to use it. Because you're not in that kind of a dilemma yet. So maybe it's something down the road, but unless, and there was consideration of that employee designation, this is where you have to park. I don't know, that's a real discussion between you as the village and the downtown businesses and their association. But that's where I've landed on that lot. You can do it, I wouldn't do the upper part, you could probably gain another 8, 9 if you do the upper, but it's a tougher grade, closer to River Street, not that simple and definitely more costly for what you're gonna get. I could see doing the lower if it made sense. Okay, what else? So I think that maybe what we should do is go to page 1 of what you've got in front of you. I will grab my copy. And we'll quickly walk through what I see as some of the key recommendations, okay? I'm not gonna read through them all, but I'll just highlight. Working with those downtown owners and going forward and coordinating, because you've got such a direct relationship. Their lots go into your lot, you know, and you've got to cross through. There's a unique, I'm gonna have you go back to the site plan of that proposed layout, page 4. And if you will notice, behind Bev's and the store, there is a 16-foot right-of-way, okay, which I picked up on because I basically printed every available survey map off the real property site. That is actually the only legal way of how someone park in your lot, unless they came in Pine Street, to get to the public lot. Interesting circumstance. It's designated in that location. Thankfully, everybody gets along well, but Renee's got a parking plan behind her lot because of the new apartments, okay? I'm not so sure it jives with a 16-foot right-of-way and where Kevin parks and how it all works. It's not necessarily your business, but I have to point it out because of the relationship of your lot, the village's lot, to this location. And I guess the bottom line of number 1 in my recommendations is coordination and working with that group and individual owners as needed to make sure everything is done with, you know, agreements and understandings of how it should work and how, if there's a need to modify something, making sure you're all talking to each other, I guess is really what it amounts to. Second part of that is, and again, it's not necessarily a responsibility of the village, this is a board decision certainly of how you spend your money, how you spend your time, but working with those landowners, those business owners, of opportunities for expansion of the public lot or of the private lot through some sort of partnership. You work a deal where you guys are able to apply for a grant, I don't know, but properties going up for sale. Keep your ears open and work with them because it's inadequate, and that's a key location that, as I mentioned in other parts of the report, between the physical location you've already got and the enhancement and opportunity to upgrade it all, because if you are gonna get people out of their cars and walk to your storefronts, you wanna make that a pleasant experience. It's just human nature. It's gotta feel good, it's gotta look good. Rob and Kevin, who I spoke to mostly in terms of that back area there, they're well aware. And it's been discussed, the alleyway, and trying to improve that with the beautification committee and things that have happened. So that awareness is, don't lose sight of that, I guess is really what I'm saying. Second key one is a recognition and having a direct conversation with the Homer Central Schools. When I met with Cavalier, what's it?
Nancy.
Scott, okay, head of buildings and grounds. He met me there a couple of times, we walked about it, and they know they don't have enough, okay? It's very clear they don't. The one lot off of James, that odd little thing that's coming off of James Street, there's an opportunity with the grassy area that's really not used to be able to expand. They know that, they've thought about it. It's a budget question, as is any improvement. But I would continue to make sure that there's an awareness on that from you to them of the implications of that, what happens at the school. Visitors, events during the day, special things that happen at the school. Now you've got added number of people coming to a concert or whatever it might be. And just the visitor thing of where do you park? You know, where do you go if you want to, you gotta find a spot out in the street and walk in. Again, their hands are a bit tied. I recognize that it's a tough situation, but at least make them aware that you're aware that the implications, that ripple effect is real, okay? That's a fact of life. The third one is probably a little bit of a sidebar, but it came to light when I did investigations on both of your new projects. I'll be very frank, I didn't find as much information as I thought I was concerning site plans. And I don't know, I read all the minutes from the planning board meetings, but it was not clear to me that there really had been any kind of a definitive site plan and discussion about the parking for these two new projects. My recommendation is strictly this, particularly if something more happens in your key downtown area, that you make sure that site plan review, I'm sure it's in your code, is truly addressed and dealt with, because there's oddities in what I witnessed and saw for the parking arrangement behind Bev's, conflicting with that 16-foot right-of-way, and the availability of any spaces behind Yeaman's new project, and apparently now a designation of 6 spaces out of the public lot that's going to be given or, you know, provided to that location. And you know, if it points, and again, I'm saying this strictly because of my experience with other communities. If you've got a project that's out in front of the planning board and there's aspects that are challenging, legal, sometimes you hire a special consultant because it's so complicated in seeker that your, you know, local village attorney may not have that experience. Same thing goes from a technical standpoint of reviewing site plans. I do work in a lot of different places. I don't review every submission that comes to a planning board, okay, as an illustration. But for the city of Cortland, when they've got one that's like, ooh, call Ken. Because I'm their designated guy. Aurora, into Aurora, do a lot of projects. So I'm very integrated with them as to reviewing what's going on, looking at the code, and you work with the zoning officer. And I'm just saying from here forward, because I feel like it doesn't appear, I may be wrong, that there was a great deal of scrutiny of these site plans, because they're conflicting to me when I look at them now, after the fact. Okay? So that's the third one. Again, the new lot across the river, only if you've got some sort of arrangement. I talk about handicapped parking spaces, number 5, of providing 2 additional on-street. It is not clear from ADA, there was a Massachusetts decision about the inference of the American Disabilities Act as to its applicability to public street parking. It's very clear in private off-street parking lots of 1 per every 25, that kind of thing. On-street, it's not clear. The intent is, bottom line is, accessibility to all people. It's just that simple. You have one down by T-Bank. You can't do it on your angle parking from there north because of the slope. It's too severe on the east side. When you get past Wall Street and you're past like former Sheridan's, that building, and right in there is one location for a parallel park situation. I talked to, not what's his first name, the new head of the Access to Independence. Baer is his last name. Oh, it's in the report. In any event, about how you would do it, and you could do it up there, and I was thinking on the other side, and I've seen this frequently at the post office. They have a restricted parking thing right in front of that mailbox that's out front. It's already no parking, no standing, okay? As you know, the handicap spaces don't, and often are not occupied, but that would be a perfect spot in my mind for another on-the-street parallel park thing, that if occasionally there was a need for someone in a wheelchair to go to the post office or to access the bank or someplace on that side of the street, you could provide it with your on-street parking. So that's another recommendation. Signage and improving and getting some of the striping corrected in some, couple of the lots, because they're not done properly with the access aisles and that type of thing. So the balance of 7 through 12 here are relatively minor, more signage and just designation of, how to do things. I'll point out the James Street lot as my last comment. 5 of the spaces on James Street, and you may well know it, and it's in the report, there's an overview blow-up of that's gonna be coming in the final report, are directly off the street. You cross the sidewalk, you park. I don't know whether striping or what might be the best way, but I'm just saying, and nothing's happened, at least the visibility is good there, but I guess I will always be an advocate for the pedestrian relative to the driver, that you want to be conscious of making that as safe of an entry-exit as you can. There's a designated portion you theoretically are going in, but if you're parking in that spot, that's the only way to get to that spot, is across the sidewalk. Not a safe situation, not a safe situation. I think that's it. I've exhausted myself. I've covered a lot. You will get a final report. I will wait, I will coordinate, be it with whomever or however you want to proceed from here with, and I've tweaked some things from the draft that I had forwarded and dropped off a couple of weeks ago, as I've continued to mull this. It's like one of those things like, wait a second, that's a better idea. So and that's where it's at. So you direct me as to, if you want to give it a week for comments back, based on this. I don't know where the mayor's at. I heard from him one time, and that was it. I don't know what his thoughts are. His comment was about those 4 spaces. I can change it. I was just trying to maximize the space that's there. That was my
We
only.
needed to know what we had, so you did great.
Yeah.
Because we weren't sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's gonna give you a lot of information, there's no question. How you proceed from here, that is your call. There's some easy things to clean up. And then there's big picture things that I think you just need to be aware of, that you wanna consider as you go forward. Okay? Any questions, anything else?
Well, very, very thorough, Ken, but I was impressed that you touched on, if you're parking out back, that little John out front has to be completed, and can't.
Absolutely. There's no
You
question.
covered it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Nope. Ken, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Mike's got something.
Can I get a copy of this?
Yes.
See it?
It's not done.
No, I
But when
realize
it's-
it's not done, but I'd like to read through.
Oh,
some
yeah.
of the
Oh, no, I want you
records
to.
that go on.
In fact, you should see it now.
Yeah.
There's 2 hard copies.
Actually,
That's a
Do you
little,
have one?
We had already
that's
said.
a little joke, Ken, I'm a little disappointed you didn't come out with the parking garage that I wanted. These guys.
Can't do it, I can't do it. I'm sorry.
We'll get out someday,
all right.
someday.
And in fact, I'll give you this. What you did, so you see that.
It's a lot to digest and discuss.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody has anything else for Ken?
No sitting around, that's for sure.
We'll move forward with the treasurer's report.
I'll make a motion to accept the treasurer's report and pay the bills.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That should cover the paying of the bills too, correct, Tanya?
Yep.
All right, so then we get to move on to report of offices. Dog report. Any discussions?
I'll make a motion to accept it written.
Second? I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Next, I think we have the codes. Discussion.
Busy guy.
We haven't had any reported problems that week. I didn't think so. I haven't heard of anything.
A lot of things have been coming to him. He's been addressing via email to respondents and getting some decent results.
I can't get over how nice this report is, so we can understand it.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you wait for like a minute now?
Sure.
Okay.
Next, we can look at DPW. If anybody has any questions for DPW, he's sitting right there.
Supposed to be 60 this weekend.
No.
Just gonna come over.
Friday.
Friday or Sunday or something. I'm thinking flooding
No,
and
there's none.
all the crap going down your drains. and-
That's why our guys were out digging out some of the storm drains.
Yeah,
I
so
was gonna say that could be a major issue in the water, it really is.
are we expecting anything more, Mike?
Just that it's supposed to drop this weekend, you're gonna have a couple warm days, it's gonna drop right off.
We're not out of the woods yet. I didn't put the snow blower away. We're not out of the
Yeah,
woods
we're
yet.
not, you know that, so do I.
But, we've got plenty of salt though.
We got plenty, we're fine.
We're not the county. You're nice.
We're fine.
Hey, they keep taking money from us.
But let them know if they need anything, we got salt for it.
I did mention it. I don't think he liked it.
I'm like, remember a little salt and wound.
Oh, that was bad.
Thank you.
Alright,
I had a couple things that I might
go ahead.
say. Tim, Phil's doing the trees, next month, so if you want to connect with him as far as your people planting a few trees, that would be great, 'cause we're gonna have 40 trees, so.
Perfect.
If you can't get to them, I need to know, because we need to arrange to make sure we can.
I would figure probably like a 5
5.
max. Yeah. Yep. In some good locations, you know what I mean?
We'll try to give you some.
Good photography areas.
We'll try to give
If
you
there's
some.
anybody from the press available when we do it, that'd be wonderful.
There you go. So that'll be good, so then I'll plan on us doing 35, and you're doing 5.
Yep.
Buzzy's trip to Buzz and Phil went to Albany on our CHIPS money, and it paid off, I'm sure you guys noticed that, got refunded. We won't know the exact amount, but it'll probably be pretty much the same thing as we had last year, so. Paved New York. And did you have a date on this? You just wanna wait for the weather to break to do this parking lot that we just talked about earlier?
Well, we're gonna have to go through this and we got some time on this before we
Okay,
do
I'm
any-
just, with spring coming, we're trying to plant our trees and paving and some other things, that's all.
No, you've got a little bit of time on this, we have to go through, come up with a plan
Got
and
it.
discuss it.
So if you can, give me some dates so we know.
It'll be later.
We did get 2,700 pounds of stuff out of the little white church too.
Really?
Wow.
Somebody didn't
Nice.
notice. We took it to the dump. 2,750 pounds, I think it was, or something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's gonna be a great asset.
That got started, so. Excuse this, but you all know by now I got a little puppy. And guess what? She discovered where my plates laid, so. So just bear with me for a little bit.
Yep.
That's all I had, unless you had something else for me, so.
Alright, thank
I'll
you.
make a motion to accept the DPW report as written.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Alright. Fire department. Mike, I think you're back up.
Yeah, I think Malin sent his report, I got the call summary.
He did.
But I'm sure you got all that too, so. Steve's here too, your second assistant chief, so if you need to ask any questions, we're both right here, so.
The climate vent system, is that working better now?
All set, all repaired, yep,
And we have the county mutual aid plan, which we'll sign tonight.
very good, very good. We're working on a number, I don't have the full number on them. Malin asked you about some of the old bunker gear.
Right.
I don't have the full numbers for you yet, but we are working on that.
Well, he put down 15, requesting 15 be surplus.
I'll make a motion that we accept the fire department report as written.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Next, we have the fire inspector report. Now, I did talk with Kevin McMahon, our code inspector, because he has to file a report with the state. And Cody is working on this, but we are very much behind, but
On reports or
on,
other things?
no, on catching up, on getting all these inspections done. Cody's got a plan, and he's working on it. As far as the state's concerned, we've got a code inspector, we've got a fire inspector, and he's working his tail off, so they're satisfied with that. But it's just something we need to keep an eye on and have him keep plugging away at.
Now, I notice on the bottom, he makes mention to the awful fire that happened up in Watertown. They didn't have any fire detectors in the home, but I know, isn't there a new law on that? They changed them so that it's a sealed battery now in them, is that correct?
10 years.
Yeah, 10-year battery.
It's the 10.
Yep,
You can still buy the older ones, I think, until they run out.
okay,
Well, and that's, I know that's a New York State law.
yeah.
I think you can't sell your place without the new ones.
Yeah, but isn't there a date?
It's for new construction.
For new construction.
Or you sell your house. and you
Okay.
have it in there.
Okay.
There's dates on the detector.
But isn't there a date when you have to have the new 10-year?
Not at residential.
Not in residential?
If you do substantial improvements to renovations or build a new house.
Actually, what we can do now is usually fall back and spring ahead, check the batteries in your smoke detector, so.
Check the dates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
PSA announcement right now, you know, we've already sprung ahead, check your
Absolutely.
smoke detectors and your CO2 detectors and make sure the fresh batteries.
Yep.
Okay, any other discussion?
I'll make the motion if there's no further discussion.
Any
I'll second.
All in favor? Police department.
I have to say, since our last meeting, I got to go for a ride with one of the officers, and it was definitely an eye-opener, a great officer.
Was that your idea or theirs?
I didn't have to ride in the back this time, which is very pleasant, because there's not much room. I don't recommend anybody getting arrested. There's only about 6 inches back there, they'd have to throw me in like a sack of potatoes. And, you know, it's no fun. No, I'm only kidding. Never rode in the back, thank God, because it's not much room. But anyhow, it was really eye-opening on the number of people who speed in town. I imagine it's quite a bit. And we made 7 stops that night, and we gave out 3 tickets, one for speeding through downtown here for the school zone, doing like 40 or something. And then a couple others were for cell phones, which he could have done more, but I mean, he was being a nice guy and just gave you a cell phone, so. We have a very good, attentive police department, but they're for us to keep our village safe, folks, so, they're doing a great job, so, thank you.
I think we also should,
Chief, I have a couple questions for you. First, I know we've got the new signs for the school zone by Copeland Avenue.
Yes.
Is there anything we can do further for education of folks on that?
Well, we sent it to Homer News, we put it on, we didn't get it on our Facebook page and the signs.
I'll have to,
I don't
If
know.
not, we can get a picture of it, we can get it on the Facebook page.
okay.
I was gonna talk with Mike, apparently Buzz has got some,
Flashing.
flashing. If we get those signs up in the spring, when the weather gets better, to help out.
I've had a couple of people come up and thank us as a board for getting that done.
There's not a lot of sidewalks there, but
Next.
we probably need to work on that.
And then next step is get the enforcement on, and the education, and on that one, and then we'll work on sidewalk.
I agree. Well, that's one of the reasons we lowered it, because you gotta walk on the road there.
Second thing I had, Chief, was you attended the IRT meeting. Any updates on that?
So Tuesday I went to it and possibly an issue with the housing. They're still trying to work it out. Simple, and they may not be able to be housed there this year, so, hopefully we'll have an answer on that next week. And it's not out of the realm of being housed at one of the schools, because that's what they do over in Norwich. They house them in the school, and do the activities in another part of the school, so. So we'll get more answers on that. And also funding's come up through the county, and they're probably gonna reach out to start doing some fundraisers for it, which is a good thing, you know. Hopefully there's some companies out there who'd like to donate.
Yeah, this is a great, for those that aren't familiar with, when they came through, what was it, 2 years ago?
Right, yep.
Yeah, this is a great, opportunity for our residents, so if anybody wants to,
All of Portland.
any, companies wanna help contribute to that, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, 30-mile, they serve people 30-mile radius from here, so.
I'll make a motion to accept the report as written.
Second,
Yeah, second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Alright. Rec, Zach,
Basketball concluded this past Saturday with we had 12 teams compete in a tournament between the intermediate and junior Phillips Library. And Tammy, who does the arts and crafts program on the green and at the park. We're gonna get together and do some pre-programming before she does her arts and crafts, maybe some after, maybe include some older kids in that as well. Also, we're looking into the costs for doing movies on the green. That's not in this report. The library might have access to a grant to get some of that, some of those supplies. They already have a movie license to show it. So at the moment, we're looking for a projector and a screen.
Could one be donated?
Certainly, certainly.
I think I have one for you.
Yeah,
Yep.
big,
It's like the one we used before here. It's basically the same thing.
cool, right on. T-ball transition has been a little slow, and we're still trying to figure out whether or not City of Cortland residents who have participated or want to participate in T-ball will be allowed to participate in Homer T-ball. There are boundaries for Homer Little League, Cortland Little League, and it's not clear whether or not Cortland will allow us to have those kids. I know we're talking T-ball here. It doesn't seem like it should be an issue, but it is. Also met with the football directors of Cortland, Dryden, Groton. And Groton's trying to come in. I don't think Dryden's going to join us at this point, but possibly. So our league is expanding, which is very nice. And here I wrote we have 3 concerts booked so far. Actually, at this moment, we're all booked tentatively. I've got a list. I'll publish that once I talk with Chris. 7 or 8. I think it's 8. And that's really it for now.
any questions?
Did the issues with people calling in get resolved as far as the Little League signing
Not
up?
completely, but I'm working along with Brian Fox to.
Okay, so they got in touch with you and
Yeah.
trying to correct it?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
and I've got a source inside that's helping correct issues,
Yeah, 'cause I
so,
reached out to both of them the other day.
yeah.
Okay, good. Excellent. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried, thank you. Water billing. Kristen?
Homepage for April 1. Billing?
Page, yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we have that, and I'll email it to you, what it's gonna look like. So we have that. So this next billing,
Is
it'll be a full page.
it gonna be like white paper, or is it still gonna be the yellow, like we have the yellow card stock?
Well, I guess that's up for discussion. I mean, I like the colored paper, because I think it catches people's eye and it gets lost not as easily.
I
So-
agree, I just didn't know with us going to the full size if we were going with the yellow. I think it's a good idea.
It's gonna be
Yeah.
folded up into an envelope, or is
Yeah.
it just, okay, so we can actually put stuff on the back maybe, like.
Yes, so
That's on-
this April billing, we're gonna have a newsletter on the back, of the water bills,
Do you have any topics in mind so far, or?
hails on it.
He's always got a good idea, so let people know about things.
Yeah, so
Copeland Avenue for one.
that's the big water billing news, we're gonna have the new water bills, and I'll email those to you, so you guys can see what they look like ahead of time.
And so now we're sending these directly to the landlords too.
Yeah, I will be.
That'll be in July, I think, that's it, right?
For starting in July, bill, okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna try to get that done. What I'll need to do is go through and match up all of the owners, because all of the information isn't necessarily correct in the water billing, because people have been putting the tenants' names in it. So, you know, it'll take quite a bit of work to get all of that figured out, who owns what. And, my plan is to have it for the next water bill, but I'd like to get all of that taken care of and send a letter to all of the landlords so they know that it's happening. I mean, we've been talking about it for a while, but
That's
just to
gonna
send,
take some time.
yeah, so I mean, I say July, but we'll see if I'm able to get it all done, because I do want to inform all of the landlords that it's gonna be happening, and then make sure we have the up-to-date owners. So, and that's what we'll do moving forward, and then it's up to the landlord however they wanna deal with it. I know some landlords actually make a copy of it and give it to the tenant and say, it's your responsibility. And some just include it in the rent. Some, you know, will give it to them and expect the money back to them, and the landlord will pay it. So all of that is, you know, I don't care how they do it, but.
I just wanna
That
make
way
sure
we
that they
know.
know this is coming, so that they can put a plan in place if they don't.
Correct, that's my expectation as well. And this way, everybody knows what's getting paid and what's not. That way, there's no surprises when they get the re-levy on the taxes. Oh, my tenant has been paying, you know, so I think this will be helpful. Some might not, you know, embrace it completely, but I think it's overall, it's better for them as well, personally, is my opinion.
Have we had any more issues with billing, with,
Not really, there hasn't been any, issues that have come up as far as the billing. There was, something that had come up that with the new ownership, as far as when somebody purchases a property and it's past a certain date, then, the new owners don't get put on, you know, the tax bill and stuff. So sometimes there was an in-between time that like final water reads have been taken and then a new owner. And so the final water bill wasn't paid yet and it went on the taxes. So then we were gonna have to figure that out as far as, because the re-levy is not the responsibility of the new owner, you know, it's the previous owner. So that just adds another thing for me to make note of, to make sure that, there's reports taken at the end of the, you know, the fiscal year.
Are you
So
talking
those
like
are
when,
taken.
you sell your home to somebody else or something like that? Shouldn't that be something that you would
Yeah, it's
negotiate?
pretty, it's pretty sloppy to not get a final water read and make sure it's paid. If you represent a lender and you do that, you don't have trouble.
that's really not on us, that's on
No.
them.
That's on the-
So, and that's why I wanna make sure is, our systems are up right now, we haven't had any issues with that, that's.
Right, no, this is something that I had just come up with, like
Okay.
that it was just brought to my attention.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, like you said, it's usually always taken care of at closing, so that's
Yeah.
why it hasn't come up before, but this particular incident didn't. And so that's why, you know, I'm gonna try to do it
You're gonna help them out.
above and beyond to try to get it so it
Great
doesn't
thing you
happen
do.
again.
Appreciate that, Chris.
Well, thank you, I tried.
Any other questions for Kristen? Can I get a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Buzz,
Yes.
Water and sewer.
were the 4 frozen meters old ones or new ones?
Everywhere the new ones.
Is that because they just weren't buried deep enough into a cellar or crawl space? or
Well, usually, you have some
They
deep
weren't-
cold air coming in someplace along the line there. We had that real deep freeze there we had.
something? Okay.
It just wasn't enough heat in there to keep them from freezing, so.
Wow.
And I'm gonna put this out there, guys, don't put your rags down the sewer. Thank you, Buzz, and your crew for digging those things out. I know that's not a pleasant job.
I'll put it in. Have to get Matt's up here or something.
All right.
Well,
Buzz,
thank you.
anything you wanna share with,
Well, I just wanna say, she was talking about the bills going out and the things, but just let people know that the water quality board be on there and the link to go to it. They can see all the testing that we have to do on the water, just to make sure the water's clean and safe and no petroleum and good other stuff that's tested for it, so.
good, good. Anybody have any questions for Buzz? Can I get a
Excellent.
motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Also, we're trying to get all our classes in as much as we can to keep our, water licenses, so. Been doing a lot of those this last couple of months, and there's one for the big save too, I recommend.
Yeah, I saw the dig safe one. Good. Thank you. All right. Seeing no more reports, I'd like to open up the privilege of the floor to anybody who would like to speak. Anybody? Once?
I just had a comment back to the tree part that we're doing
Uh-huh.
for the village trees. We're having a really hard time getting hold of people to see if they want a tree or not. I was thinking maybe like Buzz has, something hanging on the door to let them know, maybe call the street department for their address and stuff and let them suggest.
Actually, how about we have them call the office, that way they'll,
For the office.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that, didn't we, John?
We got a hang tag.
There was about calling.
They have like the little door knocker things you can get at like Staples and stuff like, places like that.
Yeah.
It should be easily to make up fairly cheap.
so, if we get a list of the houses, and then, we'll have somebody at the front office get the door hangers, and we'll put them out. Good idea. All right, seeing that there's nothing else from the privilege of the floor, moving on to old business. We put out the RFPs for, the tree contract. Dan, do you wanna discuss anything on that?
Only had one responsive bidder,
Out of, we sent, what,
we, numerous inquiries and sent out, to all the areas that where the RFPs need to go, and like I said, we had numerous inquiries, I thought we'd have, at least 5 to upwards to 10, but nothing.
all we had is one back.
Yep.
So. You have anybody that'd like to discuss anything about the bid that we have back?
I looked at it and it looked pretty good from when I had to have some limbs trimmed for $500. This is a much better deal. So there, this person is giving the village a
Yeah, I
pretty,
think the numbers
pretty,
are.
very, they think very fair and, for the village, so.
You're dealing with someone very familiar with the.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
He also lives in the village.
Dante, do you have anything to add?
No, who is it?
Mr. DeVoe.
Mr. Defoe.
Oh, Defoe.
Seems pretty reasonable. Look, our trees are moving more than.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make, go ahead. I'll make a motion to accept this bid proposal.
Can I get a second? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right.
And so we'll have the mayor or you sign the contract sometime in the future?
Yep.
In case we need some trees. Okay.
So, we were talking about mentioning that for the others, it says we're gonna be buying trees, we have to bring everything here.
Right, that was one of the things that we did discuss, is that on the RFP, we wanted a per tree purchase. This was not done, they're not interested in that, but in the past, we've been doing the tree purchasing ourselves in-house. So I see no reason why we don't just continue to do the in-house tree purchasing. That seems to be working for us.
And planting.
And planting.
And the plan, right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, moving on, approval of the proposal with WHXC for Happening in Homer and yearly ad buy.
I don't have a problem with it because the cost is minimal, but isn't it like a TSO or public service and PSA? I don't know. It's not a lot.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I think this is more,
The question of having a Homer or the ad by itself, or the ad by.
we're talking about the Happening in Homer.
Yeah, that's more for, to meet the trustees, talk to the mayor, I appreciate it, PSAs, but it's beyond, I think, a little more than just informational.
Yeah, but like the cost is minimal.
And we can,
That's Sarah goes, you don't have to do a million of them, you can do some or do a lot. It's very reasonable and it's the right thing to do
So-
for transparency.
I think, all right, so I think we're all in agreement, I think, because we can add, we can control the amount and times that we do this, and we can give it a shot and try it. The, ad through the yearly ad buy through X101, we tried this, last year, and we're up for renewal this year.
Those are digital ads, I'm not doing that, these are actually on-air ads, and then also on the media calendar, so.
This include things from maybe like for the music series and stuff?
Yep.
Huh?
I don't have a problem with it.
All right.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Yeah, unless we have any issues, I'd like to combine these both into one motion.
Yeah, that's right, that's what it's together.
Go ahead.
I'll make one motion to do both.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, I've got mutual, oh no, okay, here's the, next up is the fire department applications. I would like to do, Mr. Coates and Mr. Brandon. Mr. Bush, I would like to put to executive session at the end of the meeting
Okay?
for Mr. Coates. Any discussion?
Don't see any red flags.
I don't either. I'll make a motion to accept.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next, we have Mr. Brandon. Do they have any questions about Mr. Brandon?
Looks like a good fit.
There you go. accept, Brandon.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to C, review and approve countywide mutual aid plan for the fire department.
We've done it for probably 50 years. I think it's a good thing to do.
And nothing's changed, right?
No. Mike or Steve, you guys have anything to add to the mutual aid? It's pretty boilerplate and standard.
Pretty standard and pretty much all the same.
It's working out all right.
Working on very well.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we accept it.
I'll second.
Have the mayor sign it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, number D.
There's nothing on it, it was just a request.
Right.
It should be-
As you guys know, we go every year, we purchase 10 sets new of bunker gear, so to help get our obsolete equipment out. And this is essentially the stuff that's towards the end of its useful life expectancy.
Those guys use it, we want to keep them safe.
So,
I'll make a motion to dump the old stuff and get the new.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Playground equipment. So Zach, I know you guys talked, yeah, actually, I was
Not
gonna
that
show
you
him-
can see it probably from 100 feet away.
I was gonna show him this, so,
Pretty cool.
let's see, oh geez, I have to. So the winner with 149 votes was this one. Do you have that up?
Yeah, if it goes quick, you can keep talking about it.
Second, with 105 votes, was the Bluegrass Playground. And then, third and tied for third, with 20 votes each, was the Game Time Looper and the Game Time Pirates. So, oh, there we go.
Take a second to,
Yeah.
it's a lot bigger than it looks, but it's a nice size.
I think what was also discussed too is putting up some split rail fencing along the roadsides to help kind of
Keep them herded in. you know.
corralled in.
There's not a lot of parking there, like none, so that's really a scary spot for, right off of Cayuga there.
This one's, this is a walking distance kind of.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, it's just.
You got
I think it'll be great.
Yeah, yeah, there is a little bit of median too on that side, but yeah.
This is
So
money
this
well
will be
worth.
Yeah, this is absolutely 100% worth it.
Subsequently, the swings that were talked about, would be brought in here too.
Yeah,
at the next month to be
the other
approved.
ones,
So I was gonna say, we're still looking to get an ADA swing, right?
Yep, yep. Thinking two of them,
picked out, correct?
yeah,
Yeah,
to some level. I'd like to possibly add a swing that is wheelchair accessible too. It's kind of a platform that you can easily get onto. And there are methods where you can swing yourself on it or with somebody else. So there's some other things we can look at too,
Okay.
ongoing.
For the public, the money was refunded from grants that we've got in the past, and people paid the money back, and so we have to use it for things to help the village. It can't be used for salaries or that kind of stuff, so this is the kind of thing that's, can only be used for, so this isn't part of anything that we're gonna raise taxes to buy this, but so it's a great thing to do.
Money well spent.
Money well spent.
Can I get a motion
I'll
to,
make that motion.
thanks, Skip.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we need this thing?
Is that?
Do we need this?
Approval of amendments to health insurance policies. And Tammy, I get the feeling you're gonna be talking to us a little bit more about this.
well, this one's actually pretty straightforward. All we're getting rid of is the 90-day waiting period for new employees or for employees that have been here and have never taken it. So currently, there's a 90-day waiting period, and the proposal is to get rid of that and to make an investment in our employees.
So they would have health insurance upon hire.
If they choose to take it and they pay their share.
Yep. Yep. Excellent.
I was kind of surprised to hear the other, that they had to wait. But so I'm all for this.
Well, for mine, like where I work, it's 6 months.
Wow.
So, and you actually don't get it until somewhere between the 7th and 8th month.
However,
Is it
we're the
retroactive?
only one in this
It's
healthcare
retroactive
care
to the
consortium
6
that we're
month
in
day.
that has a 90-day waiting period. They're all instant, all the other governments.
So,
We don't have a whole lot of turnover and everything, so this is just another good thing for our employees.
Absolutely.
So I'll make a motion that we accept this.
can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, approve updates to the employee sick time policy.
Okay, just, we're reviewing all of our policies, and the biggest notations in here are in yellow on the second page. Sick days actually can be used not only for illnesses and doctor, but we also have vision appointments, medical appointments. None of those have ever been in there, so medical testing has not been an official use of sick time. And it further defines the definition of family because it's a really outdated, it does not have stepchild, it does not have any partner, so it's just putting this more in compliance.
And we're not limiting it to any certain family member, right?
No, it's
Everybody's-
actually expanding it
It's
to
expanding,
everybody who
yep.
lives in the household,
Beautiful.
so.
Yep.
Any other discussion on that?
No?
Can I
Make a motion to accept that?
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. All right, approve procedure for auditing claims.
Okay, this is just the process that is already going on. However, we did talk about adding, a claims auditor out of you guys so that, all of it can be reviewed and released in times when there isn't meetings. So this is the policy for that. And then we would further identify who it would be when we do the organizational meeting next month.
I volunteer Ed to start.
There we go.
Well, I do have an MBA, so I should be able to handle some of the finances.
This is a good step for us. Any other discussion on this?
I'll make a motion that you appoint me to do it.
Well, it would be a list, Ed.
Oh, okay.
You're not stuck with it.
Oh, okay, not forever.
There should always be more than one.
I'll make a motion that we approve the new process.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I wouldn't throw you under the bus that
Sure
bad
you
either,
would.
Ed.
It's okay, though.
All right. Updated vehicle use policy.
Okay, the only change in here is, although we had smoking in there, we did not include other tobacco uses, and that's the only change. So it includes any form of tobacco use, nicotine use, that's all it's for.
So no smoking, no nicotine, no dipping.
No dipping, no
What do you
vaping,
think
no
you eat in the
nothing.
car?
That's all listed in there. Well, we do allow eating, but.
Thank you, because I broke the law
Way to go, Ed.
in the police car. I was eating my french fries, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you had a donut, don't tell.
Busted.
Tell the truth.
Busted. We did go up to the donut shop. Yes, we did.
Any questions about the
It's a
updated
good ride.
vehicle usage policy?
No?
I'll make a motion we accept that.
Thank you, Kevin. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass, thank you. All right, review and approve map grants as proposed by the map committee. Dan, do you want to give a quick overview on that?
Yeah, the total funds available, as of, the committee meeting last month was $170,000. 3 applicants were approved for their entire request. Total funding requested was $67,000, almost $68,000. That leaves a funding available of 102. So we're gonna do another round, we'll call it a lightning round of applications. I've already had some inquiries into it. Gonna have due a May date, it'll be mid-May. We could either do the 10th or the 17th. I'm leaning towards the 10th. It's a Friday. Said I've had a number of inquiries, so it looks like we might even have any more submissions as we had last time.
And I
You're
think,
looking for approval to
Yeah.
submit?
Well, this is just the final approval. Everyone has been notified and through the committee has gone through review. This is just the final approval to go ahead and write the grant disbursement agreements with the,
I'll make the motion that we accept it.
The applications are available at the village office.
yes, and on the website to download.
yeah, for those that are interested, see Dan, go to the village website. They're there. So I've got a motion, can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, all in favor? Aye. And for those that were interested, these institutions were already released, but we have them here as well. Review and approve the following personnel changes. Tanya, can you?
Due to civil service requirements, seasonal employees have to be reappointed each season. So the first motion is to reappoint Michael Ellis to the seasonal cemetery laborer, the position he's held for years. It will be for April 1st to November 15th, 2019.
I'll make the motion to accept.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next one is another seasonal appointment for Tammy Dotto for the Recreation Department in charge of the arts and crafts for the summer.
I'll make a motion that we accept.
Second?
Sure. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next is to reappoint Carl Cole for up to 29 hours a week. He works in the streets department each year. It will be April 1st to October 31st, 2019.
I'll make the motion to accept Carl Cole.
Second? Did I get a second?
I'll second.
Thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then we have the MEO mechanic position.
Yes, we want to create the MEO mechanic position. Currently, we have a person who is already qualified and is our mechanic, but he's not in the MEO mechanic position. So that's why we want to create it, and then eventually, after it's created, move him into that. And this way, we recognize him for what he's actually doing compared to what his title is.
And civil service requires it, so it's the right thing to do. I'll make a motion that we do that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion cast. Tanya, you're up.
The next one is our budget adjustments. It's pretty long. A lot of these are pretty standard. What happens is you'll have a little bit left over in heat, and you use a little bit in telephone. And this actually does this for every department. So we were a little under in our utilities gross tax, but we earned more in franchise fees. And that's really what this is all the way down. It's the activity we've been discussing, and it ties them all out for year end.
It's a good one.
Yeah, we ended up having to pay an extra quarter of workers' comp due to our change. So the new place started in January, the old place was already paid. So it just overlaps.
I don't see any of these that are really huge that say, wow.
No, they're mostly, like I said, everything we've been discussing.
I'll make a motion that we accept the changes for the general fund.
And a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the water fund and sewer fund?
Now we're going to
Yep.
the other ones there. On the same motion.
Yep.
Oh, it was, okay, I said general fund, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to limit it.
We have the approval to deposit fire department refunds into reserves as follows.
So we received 5155 in a refund due to, this is the exhaust system. So they gave that back to us, so we want to put that in the reserves for the building. And the other one is fire reserve, we want to put into fire repair reserves, so that's a little low. And that's actually because the disability had been charging a higher rate than what the claims were, so they refunded it, but they can't do that till after they review it.
Okay.
So they eventually brought us back to a lower rate.
Okay.
So it's pretty standard, so that's what the 8,000
And it's good that the firemen aren't getting hurt. So
Exactly.
That's really important.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to allow that to be done.
Can I get a second? Thank you, then. All in favor?
Aye.
So the next one is, to deposit 32,500 in the police department car reserve account. We, got an extra billing this year, so that is what that's from.
Extra income.
Yes, well, we got an extra income from an old billing from 2016 and 2015, so. So we wanna put the money into the police car reserves.
I'll make a motion that we do that. We have to replace those cars every 3 years anyhow, so it's the right thing. Bam,
Can I get a second?
sack of potatoes in the bag.
Thanks, all in favor?
Aye.
Alright. Next up, we have the authorized memorandum of understanding between the village and the Center for the Arts. Did everybody get a chance to read through
I
this?
did
yet?
not, I just wanted to read
Okay.
it fast. This was the only thing I did.
Generally, the summation is, the Center for the Arts, that back parking lot needs to be, revamped, and we have a use for the material, they need to get rid of it. And so essentially, we will remove it and use the material, plus get some meeting times in exchange for removing it.
Okay,
Sounds like a plan.
yeah.
I'll make the motion that we accept that.
Can I get a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Center for Arts does a lot for this village.
This is
This is amazing.
it's a win-win for both of our organizations.
Please don't.
So the last piece is for executive session.
What's that?
Executive. The last
Okay.
piece.
Okay.
Oh, did I put it in?
So nothing from contact, all right? Kevin?
I'm good.
Tim?
Just for those of you folks, make sure you check your smoke detectors, change them if you can, to the new ones. And, just keep that in mind, that's an important thing.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, you do have to change them, or at least you have to attest to that you'll change them on the sale of a residential house.
Okay.
That's the requirement.
Okay.
Specifically, I don't know if that.
No, absolutely appreciate that, thank you.
The last time that, a couple of meetings ago, when they came in and talked about radon, and I got a free radon test, and I got it back, and my first floor is now at 10. 4 is okay. 4 is okay. During the summer, it's 3.4, so, lung cancer. Not yet, but possible. So I don't know what I'm gonna do. But anyhow, it just tells you that we have radon in the village. There's a free, it just tells you that we have radon in the village. There's a free, it didn't cost a thing. They give them to you, they test.
Things one, I'd like to thank Zach for our IT support this evening, keeping everybody connected. Thank you. The second thing is that the county is looking at changing up some of the recycling. I don't know if you guys heard about that.
No.
Pulling out some of the glass that is not 5-cent redeemable, and they passed that out. They had a short, very short, like 5-minute meeting at the recycling center. What they're gonna do is, they're gonna pull out the glass, because it's not, the recycling market is tanked, but they can use it as cover fill at whatever the location there is on the
Ontario County landfill.
right. So the short answer is, how does this affect us? Right now, it doesn't affect us at all. This is a voluntary thing. If residents want to take certain glass items over to the recycling center, they can put it in there. In the long term, when we renegotiate our trash contract, that's probably gonna be something we need to add into the RFP. And if we pull the trash in-house, it's something we're gonna have to take into consideration, how are we gonna solve this with having a separate recycling container with glass. I don't have the answer to that, but it's something we need to be aware of that's coming down the road.
Something
That would make it harder if you had a robot.
Alright.
Yeah, no doubt.
Alright, does anybody have any other questions or last minute things? At this point, I'm gonna close the meeting. Can I get a motion to close and go into executive session to
I'll make the
discuss
motion.
personnel matters and
Real estate.
real estate transactions? Alright, Mike,